Hi everyone, my name is Ibrahim Haddad. I am the Executive Director of LFAI Data, and it is my pleasure today to talk to you about open source defined power systems and the role of open source and AI in this transformation. I think one of the critical essays that have been written in the past couple of decades would be the Andreessen essay on why software is eating the world. And this was actually a turning point in terms of identifying and communicating the reliance we have on software in every industry across the globe, where companies are transitioning to being reliant on software for their operation and their services. And what's really interesting is if you look at the various industries, whether it's telecom, healthcare, financial services, entertainment, transportation, etc., many of these industries, actually every single one you see on the screen, even and including defense industry, have been through that process of transforming their industry to a software-defined industry, or for some of them are actually in that transition. And when it comes to the energy sector, this transformation has already started, and it is going and affecting every single facet of the industry, whether it's the metering systems, the specific infrastructure you have in place, the communication infrastructure, the various energy resources, electric vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these various components are being affected by this software transmission and transition to more software-defined systems. And all of these are actually becoming more integrated with IoT and collecting data that includes smart grid and generation forecasting, health monitoring for various components in the grid, and so on. So basically, my basic hypothesis is that we are going towards a software-driven energy or power sector. And if we look at that large umbrella of software, a very large portion of that software being deployed, not specifically in energy, but across these various industries I've mentioned previously, is actually open source software. And basically, we are looking towards an open source software driven energy sector. And throughout my presentation, I will be touching on this concept as I proceed with my slides. And one thing I would like to mention is that I've actually added a lot of content and I might be going a little fast on the presentation, but I wanted to make sure that people listening to this presentation, they have access to the slides with extended content. So the open source has been an ongoing disruption for at least 2+ decades now. And the way I suggest companies and organizations to look at open source software is in the eye of kind of a strategic perspective, not simply from a tactical perspective. What that means is open source is just another tool in your toolbox. You have research established with established academia organization. You have collaboration with open source projects. You have collaboration across industries and standardization organization. You have your internal R&D. You have investments with startups. And open source from that perspective is just one of these different tools you use to build up your portfolio and provide enablement for your services and your products. Second is product dependency. If you look across different industries, there has been higher and higher dependencies in creating product and services based on open source, which bring us to the strategic importance of open source. Open source has a very flexible business model from a licensing perspective. There are different ways you can use open source, building with open source, building on top of open source, mixing code together, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of flexibility with the licensing models. Number 4 is software is king, as I mentioned previously, and with open source software eating the actual software, just to continue with the same meme of Mark Andreessen, it becomes very critical for organization to rely on open source and consider it an important and key building component of their software strategy. The fifth element is innovation and value, where typically 80% of the efforts being put generate 20%, the proprietary principle, whereas 20% of the added value generate 80% of the revenues. So open source fit that 80% in terms of efforts, where why would you want to invest in creating a lot of the code and the software and the components and the libraries and the frameworks that will not necessarily generate a lot of value for you, hence the value of open source in accelerating development from that perspective. And of course, product enablement and the role open source plays there. And when I say product, it's product and services. So open source is actually a strategic asset. And if you look across different organizations in various industries, embedded, supercomputing, telecom, healthcare, entertainment, automotive, etc., we see that on average, companies and organizations in these industries have an average reliance of open source up to 30% of their complete software stack. And that percentage increases to up to 80% for best-in-class organization with really high reliance on open source. So you can see really that in the best-in-class category, organization only need to create 20% of the code they rely in their product and services while using 80% of the complete stack as open source solutions. So it is actually a market accelerant. It provides accelerations and a lot of benefits for various constituents, whether it's providing user environment for collaboration, it's actually an innovation multiplier, multiple organizations, hundreds of individuals, dozens of organizations, and so on, working on solving common problems, enabling new business opportunities, all of that leading to better products. And of course, there are many advantages experienced by people and organizations participating in the process. Access to source code is one of them, ability to customize the code, rapid development, the improved peer review across organizations, the influence you have on the roadmap via your participation. I mentioned the flexible licensing model and many, many others. So why would you want to contribute to open source project? A lot of reasons. Provide a reference to implementation, influence the roadmap and development of the project, and basically taking control of your own destiny. Why would an organization rely on an open source component or framework or library where they're not even participating in it? So you need that participation to allow you to exercise influence on the technical implementation of the specific project. And there are really a dozen different reasons why you would want to participate and contribute to open source project. I will for the sake of time, I will skip through them to have more time for other discussions. And of course, one of the things we have the privilege to see sitting in the Linux Foundation is kind of looking at these hundreds of companies that are members of the Linux Foundation and active in the development of our hundreds of projects hosted in the foundation, and draw different common characteristics across all these different projects or organizations involved in these different projects. So most of them have an executive sponsor funding open source activities. They have a well-established open source strategy. Most of them have an OSPO function, which is the open source program management office. They participate heavily in critical open source technologies relevant to their domain. They have compliance programs. They have established relationships and membership in open source foundation and key initiatives. And they drive collaboration with other companies and use open source as a vehicle for these collaborations. So all of that kind of quick introduction on open source to lead us to open source and AI and the energy sector. So when we look at the grid, kind of grid 101, you can see it as a multi-component system where you have the generation systems, you have the transmission and distribution systems, and of course, at the end, you have the consumption part of it. And AI in the energy sector will have and is already having a critical impact. And a lot of the AI and related technologies, machine learning technologies, have already been deployed and are being developed and tested and deployed across the grid to allow communication and efficiencies for smart grids, smart meters, Internet of Things, and all connected devices together. So when we look again at that chart for generation, transmission, distribution, and consumption, AI plays a key role in improving generation forecast, in maintaining stability and reliability across transmission and distribution, in improving demand forecast, in improving and creating efficient demand side management, and across the whole grid, optimizing storage and market design and operation. And some of the key case studies of AI applications in the energy sector are in relation to fault prediction, which is major application of AI in the sector, are in relation to maintenance. For instance, using drones equipped with cameras that are able to detect any kind of bad conditions in the power assets and determine what needs to be repaired and what needs to be replaced. In Another use case application is actually energy efficiency. A fourth one is the choice of energy provider. This AI systems are becoming more familiar with the habits of customers and allowing them to provide recommendation on, given the different markets, who would be the better provider of the energy. Forecasting is a key use case application in the energy sector, and the use of AI is helping improve and started to help improve forecasting of demand and generation, and as a result of that, improving the production and the decision making of that. Speaking about decision making, it's better decision making. So with AI system, it's facilitating decision making about optimal times for distributing generation to the grids and versus rather to draw from it, and many other situations like that. Other use cases of AI are in relation to disaster recovery and the prevention of loss, whether it's due to informal connections or other challenges in the sector. So these are, 8 different use cases, and I'm sure there are dozens other use cases of AI in the sector with really a lot of benefits, including quicker restoration of power after disturbances or natural disasters, reducing the cost of operation and maintenance, improving the stability and reliability of the grid, improving efficiency of power management, better disaster recovery procedures, decreasing maintenance costs, eliminating or minimizing the human cost in maintenance. I gave the example of drone to reach different power lines and grids in remote areas, and many other benefits. And with that, just kind of a quick introduction into open source and data ecosystem. So in LFAI Data, we actually track key projects in the ecosystem. We have 279 projects in our landscape, accessible via https://l as in landscape.lfaidata.foundation. And what you see on the screen is just a screenshot of that landscape. It's an interactive landscape, and you can visit the website and explore all of these different projects. So we capture about 280 projects on that landscape, representing over 35,000 active developer. And these projects are coming from over 130 founding organizations and universities. So as you can see, this is just the key critical projects. And of course, we have a very long tail of projects that are not yet mainstream, not yet highly adopted or active, but the landscape captures the top projects. And you can see the landscape is categorized in different buckets. I think there are 11 or 12 different categories, and within each category, for instance, deep learning is a category. We have multiple subcategories such as framework, platform, library, and tool. So it's a great learning tool to know what's available in terms of functionality in any given category that you're looking to explore. And what's really fascinating is the speed of development. So there are about 1 million new line of code added to the project featured on the landscape every 7 to 10 days. And this is really just incredible. And the question is, who can beat that speed of development? So if you're working internally on these projects, this is really just an insane speed of development that no single organization can come close to. So open source libraries, frameworks, platform, tools, all of these projects that I mentioned on the landscape, they make AI accessible to everyone, to all organizations, to benefit from, and also help people and organizations accelerate the pace of AI applied research. And this is where LFAI and Data Foundation comes in. We are a not-for-profit organization similar to LF Energy, the host of this conference. We are an open source effort focused on AI and data, hosted at the Linux Foundation. And we today support 28 projects that are hosted with us, supporting their development and helping them accelerate the innovation and accelerate their trajectory to adoption. Our growth has been really something fantastic. Last year alone, we added 15 new projects to the foundation and added 16 new members. And we are currently supported by 46 members with over 2,000 subscribers to our main mailing list. We have a very active and growing developer community. So on the first line, you see there the cumulative number and statistics of contributors, pull requests on GitHub, the number of commits, total issues, the number of repos we manage, and the number of Slack messages. So the first line is basically the total of 2020 as a whole year. And then the second line is 2020 plus the first 3 months of 2021. And you can see even in 3 months, we've had some major increases in terms of numbers and percentages compared to 2020. So we're growing, and it's really awesome to see these numbers as a great indication of the active developer community of LFAI and Data. In terms of structure, we have a similar structure to LF Energy for those familiar with LF Energy or CNCF or LF Edge or any other LF umbrella foundation. On the left-hand side, we have our funding effort, which is basically the foundation governance, the governing board of LF AI and Data, under which we have a number of committees. In the middle, we have the technical coordination body, which is the Technical Advisory Council, with 3 different active committees in it. And on the right-hand side, we have the hosted projects. And as I mentioned, we have 28 projects. And I think one of them is missing as we're working on the developing its logo. But there are 28 hosted projects, and each of these projects, they have their own independent technical governance. And as you can see on the slide, projects are divided into graduated projects. We have 6 of them. We also have a number of projects that are in incubation, and then we have 1 project in the sandbox category. As I mentioned, we have a number of members. So this slide showcases our members. And if you are involved in the open source AI ecosystem and you are not a member of LFAI and Data, I would encourage you to send me a note and discuss the benefits of joining and how we could help your organization and your AI open source efforts. This is kind of an improved slide showcasing the different projects. So we have projects that touch different categories of AI, from machine learning to infrastructure, to models, to data, to training, and to feature stores, and many others, including 3 different projects on the trusted and responsible AI topic. So I would really encourage you to visit the landscape on the link provided and explore the projects that are hosted in our foundations. And what's really interesting is who is hosting project with LFAI and Data. So there are a number of companies, 21 organizations hosting projects with us, and you can see the list on the screen. And these are the who's who of tech across the globe in Asia, Europe, and North America. And again, if you are hosting a project or managing an open source AI project, I would encourage you to reach out to us and explore hosting it in our foundation. So for the next few slides, I will not go through them in the presentation due to time limitation. However, I wanted to include them so that people who have access to the slides as a result of this presentation will be able to identify how they can formalize their open source efforts and how to get started. So I have included 23 different action items that an organization, such as a company in the energy sector, can use as a starting point to formalize their open source efforts and help them have kind of an action plan on how they can get involved in the open source ecosystem, build up their open source operation, and become active in the specific projects they are using in their products and services. So I would really encourage you to visit this section, download the slides, and use these different suggestions to help you get started building your open source map for your organization. And of course, I provide a summary of best and worst practices in various categories in consuming open source, contributing to open source, engaging with existing communities, building a new community, best and worst practices when it comes to open source compliance and messaging. And also, I would encourage you to go through this offline as you will have access to the slides. And the road ahead for organizations in the energy sector can be summarized in the slide, where initially companies start being exposed to open source and start consuming open source code, and then they become a little bit of a participant in select projects, and then at that point they become to manage their involvement, and then they realize the importance open source software plays in their stack, and then they move to become an active participant and contributor to key projects. And then some organizations are happy to stay at that stage. Others want to have much higher influence in these projects. And then they become even further more and more involved in these projects and driving and going towards becoming a leader based on a specific business strategy that they have established internally. So the transformation is actually happening and in the energy sector, similarly to how it's happened in many other sectors for the past 2 decades. And the key question is, do you as a company in the energy sector want other companies, some of them may not be even in your sector, to drive and lead the critical technical projects that are essential building blocks for your transformation and for your modernization of your stack? Or would you rather be the driver of these projects that are critical to you? And to become and to be the driver of these projects, involvement in open source is very critical. Thank you for watching my presentation. Again, my presentation will be available offline for download. I highly encourage you to download the slides, explore the various sections I included, which I didn't have time to cover due to time limitation. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me on my email shown on the slide, and I'm very happy to connect with you over a call at a later time. Thank you very much.